Well, welcome back, everybody. Yes, we're ready for our next session, which is on attracting direct investment into GCC economies. And basically, it tells you about how you can be successful in the region. And we have an excellent speaker to talk us through this. Our speaker is Simon Galpin, advisor, OCO Global. He's a venture partner at PlusVC and formerly MD of the Bahrain Economic Development Board. Simon has been excellent. We've been following his work for a long time. There's no better person to talk to you about how you can make investments work for you in the region. So welcome, Simon. Do take this away.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's really a pleasure to be with you today, and good afternoon, everyone. Normally, I'm based in the Kingdom of Bahrain, and I've been living there working for the Economic Development Board for the past 5 years. I'm actually in the UK this week, and I'm speaking to you in two capacities. I'm currently an advisor to OCO Global, which is a leading consulting firm headquartered out of Belfast that provides economic development and investment and trade promotion advice to countries, economies, and companies around the world. But I've also joined a new venture capital firm called PlusVC, and I serve as a venture advisor, if you like, for them too. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about investment opportunities across the GCC, specifically focusing on some of the smaller economies, such as Bahrain, and also focusing on or coming at it from the angle of SMEs. What small and medium-sized businesses, what startups can actually consider as opportunities in the GCC. So I'll run through a few slides, and then I'd like to leave a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So firstly, I genuinely believe that there has never been a better time to be looking to invest, to set up, to have a presence in the GCC than there is right now. This is a region that is going through a very positive transformation. And really, this is a great time for UK business to look and give more attention to the GCC. Over the next year or so. Few stats. I mean, the region is a mixture of countries that vary tremendously in size, vary tremendously in terms of the size of their economies and population. But each one of these countries has some very specific opportunities. And of course, you can use a base in any one of them to then access opportunities elsewhere across the GCC. But there's some very big differences, and companies do need to do their homework, because the cost structure, the length and time to set up can vary tremendously from one country to another. When it comes to investment, the last 2 years have been a really, really tough time. If we look at the figures for last year, global foreign direct investment flows fell by 35%. So they dropped tremendously. But at the same time, we've seen the two largest economies in the GCC actually get more investment. And we've seen foreign direct investment flows grow, both in the United Arab Emirates and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So this shows that the world's attention is very much on future opportunities in the GCC. And it's a testament to these opportunities and how well these countries are presenting and promoting themselves that they're seeing investment grow during the COVID period and a massive downturn in global FDI. And of course, one of the key reasons why people are looking at this region is that they have some real demographic opportunities and advantages. The population right across the GCC is a young population. We are seeing a very large pool of tech-savvy digital natives that are really early adopters for almost any type of technology. So it's a great test market. It's a great place where if you want to see long-term growth in marketing and developing software as a service, fintech, and other technology products in this region. There are very high smartphone penetration rates, and there's been tremendous investment in putting in place the infrastructure to support technology businesses right across the region. 5G has been rolled out in many of the markets. Cloud infrastructure in terms of major data centers and data regions have been constructed and are up and running in places like Bahrain and Saudi and UAE. And this is really going to be an engine for growth. They say data is going to be the new oil. Well, the GCC is going to benefit both from being a major oil exporter, but also a major location for data centers in the future. And what we've also seen is that there is a really vibrant startup ecosystem that is emerging in each one of these different countries. Because we've got a young population, because they're tech savvy, many people are choosing to start their own business, and we're seeing a really, really good early stage startup ecosystem. And in my role as a venture capitalist, we're very excited by the number of really good young startups that are emerging across the region. And we think we're going to see a lot more investment coming in from outside to support some of these startups going forward. And of course, the location of the GCC is actually very beneficial, because the GCC, of course, is right in the middle of two massive emerging markets. South Asia, also a young demographic, but also sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa. These are going to be the big economies of the future, the big markets of the future. The GCC has great linkages to both those economies, and it's a great place to plan to develop those markets as well. So it's a great stepping stone for much, much bigger opportunities elsewhere. And there are other opportunities that are emerging. As you'll hear, virtually every one of the GCC countries has a 2030 vision that is going to help them move away from a dependency on hydrocarbons and opening up and focusing on a number of emerging sectors in the years ahead. So many of the economies are already very advanced in developing this diversification. Bahrain has been doing this for decades now, and only about 20% of Bahrain's GDP comes from the oil and gas sector. Financial services, telecoms, tourism, these sectors are becoming more and more important. And so investors from the UK should also be considering opportunities in a raft of other sectors, not just in the oil and gas industry. Having said that, of course, the oil price is really showing very strong signs of recovery, and is projected to grow by another 20% this year. And that's significant because although the economies are diversifying, many of the governments still rely on income from the hydrocarbon sector to finance and fund this diversification. So we're really in a win-win situation with a recovery of the oil price and a real drive to diversify the economies into a number of digital sectors. The other thing that fascinates me is the fact that the GCC is probably the area of the world that is going through the most fundamental transformation in terms of the regulatory environment. Now, this may sound very dull, but what this really means is that the economies in the GCC are really opening up to a number of different investors and investments from right across the world, but in a number of sectors that were previously closed to foreign direct investment. And the regulations are becoming more simplified, and we are really seeing a huge amount of interest in a number of emerging sectors right across this region. When we look at the raft of regulatory and legal changes, I can't think of another part of the world that is going through so much, improvement in the regulatory environment. We're seeing, for example, bankruptcy laws being upgraded and updated. That means that smaller businesses can fail and then reinvent themselves and come back bigger and better than before. And of course, this is really important if you're going to have a vibrant startup ecosystem. And many, many sectors now are open to 100% foreign ownership. In Bahrain doesn't have special economic zones. So, you can use the whole of the island of Bahrain as a test bed to go into other markets. And even in economies like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, more and more sectors are now open to 100% foreign ownership without necessarily having to locate yourselves in a special economic zone. The other thing is that there is intense competition to attract companies to come and invest and set up in different parts of the GCC. And this plays to the advantage of potential investors from the UK. You can compare not just one country to another, but one special economic zone to another, even within a single emirate. And because of this intense competition, you need to keep an eye on all the different offers, all the different promotions that countries and emirates are offering to attract companies like you and take advantage of some of these changes and some of these new opportunities that are being promoted. It also means that costs generally have been coming down right across the region. And for smaller businesses, concentrating on an emirate or even a country like Bahrain or Oman that have significantly lower costs could be a lower risk way to come into the market going forward. And of course, as I'm sure we're going to hear, there are numerous infrastructure projects that are being planned and financed over the next 5 or 6 years in every single one of the economies. And this is going to present opportunities, not just for lead contractors, but for service providers, subcontractors, and many, many businesses that want to come in and benefit from the investment that's going to go into these world-class projects. And it's not just infrastructure projects. Of course, there are some really world-class events that are going to put the GCC on the map over the next few years, whether it's the Expo in Dubai or, of course, the World Cup coming up in Qatar in a year to come. So tremendous opportunities. Relations with Qatar have also improved, and that also is going to create many more opportunities for people that are either based in Doha or people that want to access opportunities in Doha from other emirates. And of course, the Abraham Accords with Israel can present real opportunities to encourage businesses that may have a base in Israel to invest in Bahrain and UAE and so on in the future, and to see cross-fertilization, cross-investment between Israel, Palestine, and the rest of the GCC. But when we look at all these major opportunities, the focus can sometimes be on just the biggest, most well-known economies. Obviously, the biggest economy in the whole region is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is going through a massive transformation, which is really exciting for everybody in the GCC. The other major economy, of course, is the UAE, and both of these have real opportunities and real strengths as investment destinations. But I think we tend to focus on the opportunities that the big multinational companies can access easily. But there is still a lot that can be done by smaller medium-sized businesses that have a niche product or a niche service that they want to sell into the region. And for smaller companies, I would encourage them to not overlook the smaller economies. In many ways, small is beautiful. Smaller economies like Bahrain can offer tremendous access to companies that want to come into the region. And of course, it's not just access to clients, but access to regulators, access to decision makers. In Bahrain, we have a regulatory sandbox for fintech companies. And that means that fintech companies, scale-ups can come in, be located in Bahrain, and it's the only onshore regulatory sandbox in the region, but can have an active dialogue with the central bank to help shape the regulations, to make sure that the regulations suit your type of fintech company, whether it's crowdfunding, whether it's payment systems, whether it's robo-advisory. You can have the ear of the advisor and shape the environment, even if you're not a large company. So access to regulators and decision makers is really important. The other thing we joke about in Bahrain is that everybody knows everybody else. So you're never more than 2 degrees of separation from anybody that you need to speak to or anybody that you need to reach out to. And so you can get introductions. It's much easier to get access to those types of partners, investors, and customers in a smaller economy. It's also a low-risk test market. If you're not sure quite about how your product is going to be received across the region, why not start in a smaller economy first, keep your costs down, perfect your product and service, and then roll it out elsewhere into the region. And of course, smaller economies provide tremendous access into the large economies too. If you're based in Bahrain, Bahrain is an island, but it's connected to the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. And once you cross over the causeway, you have 3 major cities right on your doorstep. And that means that you have access to a much larger market and a much larger immediate market than you would if you were just to go into one country elsewhere. The beauty of a small market like Bahrain is also that you have lots of visitors. At the moment, of course, because of COVID, this is not the case, but normally we have around 1 million Saudi visitors a month that drive over the causeway to spend weekends and shop and spend money in Bahrain. And so that presents another market opportunity for UK exporters and UK investors as well. So don't overlook the little guys. And when it comes to the startup ecosystem, I mean, this is the thing that I think is really the future of the region. It is really, really exciting. There are so many new startups coming along. There's so much opportunity for British startups and British scale-ups to come into this market, to target potential investors, as well as potential partners and customers. So it's a great time for the smaller businesses to be looking at the region. And with the free trade agreements that we envisage really coming into force between the UK and each of the individual GCC markets, this is going to provide even more scope for smaller businesses in the UK to have the protection and the opportunity to do business in the region. A little bit about OCO Global. OCO Global is a British firm, and they have a whole network of overseas offices. We have quite a large office in Dubai that covers the GCC. I'm myself am based in Bahrain, but they have a whole network of offices that can provide support to British exporters and British investors. So if you're not sure about what market entry support you might want, a consulting firm like OCO that works both with the investment promotion agencies and trade promotion agencies, but also directly with companies, has that holistic view. They can provide you with really good advice about the latest opportunities and the latest requirements to set up across the region. So trade advisory is a growing area of OCO Global's service offering, and we're working with a number of exporters. We're also providing a lot of support for countries that are looking to access the expo in Dubai, both in terms of preparing companies before the expo, extra support, manning booths and supporting them during the expo, and then even more importantly, the follow-up, making sure that companies are really accessing opportunities and inquiries that emerge during the expo, and following up and making sure they convert those opportunities into concrete deals, concrete business opportunities. So I genuinely believe that the region is changing very much for the better. It's in the right time, and it's the right time, and this is the right place for British business to be focusing on right now. And I'd love to open up for a couple of questions and see if I can provide you with any further insights. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Simon. Yes, it was an excellent presentation, and what I got out of it was like, yes, there are opportunities across the region, not just the big guys, but also the small guys as well. We have a couple of questions for you from our audience, and if we could touch on them very swiftly, and then we'll move on to the next session. So the first one is from Maciek Baranski, who's an expert in UK FDI promotion and support. And his question is, given the high importance of relationships in GCC cultures, would you recommend buying an established business rather than doing a greenfield investment or getting involved in a greenfield investment? And is there a viable SME M&A market there?
Okay, some very good questions. Obviously, a shortcut for larger firms could be simply buying an existing firm. I think it depends which sector you're in. But there is nothing to stop people coming in with a greenfield investment, building up a team, and then growing your business and developing your own relationships. Because it really varies from one country to another. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, but for businesses coming into Bahrain, Bahrain is a very user-friendly place. It's very accessible. It's very easy to build those relationships up yourself. And, many of your customers will want to have direct relationships with you rather than through a middleman. So I would encourage people to at least consider a greenfield investment, but M&A is also another means to get into a market, and it can be a quicker way to achieve growth in the region. Your other question was about, is there a market, an SME market, was it? What, can you remind me?
Correct. Is there a viable SME M&A market there?
Well, there is. We are seeing, particularly the startup ecosystem is at an early stage. So most of the investment is going into early stage startups, but there have been a few big exits. And because of that, we are seeing a maturing of the startup ecosystem. And so although my VC really focuses on seed and early stage up to Series A, there are other VCs that are coming in, other private equity players that are very interested in more mature acquisitions. And many of the family offices across the region are very active players in private equity. So I think there's a lot of scope there. Again, it depends a little bit on which country you're looking at and which sector you're in. But there are real opportunities there. There's a lot of investment money that is looking for good deals and looking for good acquisitions.
Fabulous. Actually, there's another question for you as well, and this will be the final one. And from Mark Mortimer, Executive Director, Maybury Consulting, who's asking, could the UK's Institute of Directors be better used to promote direct investment into Bahrain and the GCC?
Well, I think there really is a role for that, both in terms of educating directors in the region, as well as providing a networking opportunity for two sides to come together to consider M&A type activity. So yeah, I think there really is, and I think one of the things that would be good to see is seeing our Institute of Directors coming in and doing even more training, more outreach across the region, and maybe even establishing a branch presence in the region going forward.
Thank you so much, Simon. You've been excellent. Kindly do stay in our virtual platform as well, our venue. I'm sure there'll be lots more questions for you. But for now, we need to say thank you and move on to our next session. It's been wonderful having you.